OC Giggins says saw Super Mario Brothers in Japanese, way better script, sub, and voices. Oh, so it finally released in Japan. I'm curious how that's going to do there. But yeah, we're hearing a lot of the foreign versions just have the localized voices doing it, which again takes me back to my original gripe with the film. Is I didn't hate the voices in it, but I didn't see the reason in having Chris Pratt and Anya Taylor Joy and all those people in it. It's just kind of like, let's get the voices from the video games. Kids don't give a shit.
Right? I didn't understand that. To me, the voice should have sounded like the boppity boopity cutaway gag from Family Guy. Like that to me was what the voice should have sounded like. I didn't dig the trying to make it just sound like a kind of generic protagonist a little bit. I don't know. The voice, I admit, never quite worked for me. But in fairness, I haven't seen the Mario film yet.
No, the movie's
just
fine.
The trailer.
That's like one of the only real gripes with it. Basically, is like, did you need it? No. Did it ruin it? No. The worst part was Seth Rogen. Like,
well, and it's pretty clear. We'll probably talk about this more a little later, but it's pretty obvious that superhero films have entered their fat Elvis phase. So we're now kind of groping for something to put in its place, right? I mean, Hollywood gropes for entirely different reasons. Ask Weinstein, but it looks like they're looking for something to sort of replace it. They're sort of scrambling for a lot of different things, as we'll talk about. I mean, we just talked about my graphic novel. There's going to be a big wave of Westerns, so that is one thing they could possibly replace it with. But it looks like in the immediate future, they're looking for video game movies to fill that void. After Sonic and now Mario, they could be forgiven for thinking that's going to be their salvation.
Well, maybe they'll get smart and make Red Dead Redemption. They'll hit both.
I mean, the game kind of is a movie anyway. It's sort of, but
especially the newer one, right, or whatever you want to call it. Because I know there's like 5 games where they call it Red Dead Redemption.
Yeah, actually, I think they would really screw up if they were to make a Red Dead Redemption movie.
Yeah,
because you're going to get a far deeper experience just playing the game for yourself. That's the beauty with like the likes of Sonic and Mario. That works because the story is basically, or the gameplay really is go from the beginning to the end of the level and use the same game mechanics. And the story is really simplistic to support those game mechanics. You can easily develop a story that fits a movie from those game mechanics and the story that you have right there. Whereas Red Dead Redemption, that's going to have the exact same problem as Uncharted and every other similar video game movie adaptation. It comes from a period when the video games were more complex and have deeper stories than the movies.
Oh, you didn't like Assassin's Creed, the film? No? Didn't
care
for that one?
Yeah.
Didn't watch it.
Right.
Completely like nice visuals, but that's about it.
Yeah. It looked like this is the funny thing. Action movies and big tentpole Hollywood blockbusters already look like video game cutscenes to begin with nowadays. Like I just saw the trailer that they're running for Guardians of the Galaxy 3, and it literally just looked like a bunch of people sitting in front of a green screen with shiny stuff flying in the foreground a little bit. And it was just like, what is the point of this? Is a video game cutscene. So it's like you adapt a video game to that, and it's like, what are we doing here? I mean, you already made your money releasing the game. In fact, you made an order of magnitude more money. You just mentioned Red Dead Redemption 2. That game, the last time I checked, and that was months ago, sold 50 million copies. I don't know, it's $60 to $70 a pop, what that sorts out to, but that's a lot of pesos. That's a lot of dollars.
Successful AAA titles have historically always outstripped the revenue of movies.
Well, it's been that way for a little while now. Like Hollywood's kind of taken notice, but they've been just flying high on the superhero that they just really haven't needed the video games yet. And this is where I was surprised where Sony didn't take advantage of it years ago, especially during the era of the PS3 where they could have synergized it with, having Blu-ray in the system and all that kind of stuff. But no, I said the same thing kind of the last week or the week before, whatever it was we were talking about, is like, yeah, the older simple games, you can interpret more of a story into it, and it's a little easier to extrapolate a movie that people can accept, I think. And I think you guys are right, because you get to some of these newer games, That was my problem with Red Dead Redemption. Sure, the playing it is part of the fun, but I was actually just jumping through the game parts just so I could get to the story, right? Like that was my main thing. Is like get through this just so I get to the next story beat because I wanted to see what happened and get to the end of the game, you know. So like I was just sucked into the story. At that
the
point.
Uncharted series, the 4 games are fantastic and way better than the silly movie. When a video game is deeper than a movie, you're in trouble.
Yeah, that is the problem. Is it's an interactive medium. So if you execute the story and the game correctly, it turns the movie adaptation into a bit of a two-dimensional appendage.
Yep.
Right? Like,
Yep.
I feel like Frank Miller. There's a quote from Frank Miller where he was talking about how, because Frank Miller's known as the guy who turned comics into a cinematic format, right? And his quote was, and this is years ago, I got into comics to make comics more like movies. Then I realized that both mediums have their different strengths and weaknesses. So I stay in comics to make comics less like movies. Right? Like
we blame him.
Right?
But I mean, just talking about Uncharted, the movie, what was ironic, especially from someone like myself, who's a huge Uncharted fan, was that the game was more believable than the movie. That you would never have had ancient galleons hoisted by helicopter battling out with each other. You'd never have that in the video game because the people who did the video game are not idiots.
Yeah. So, you could tell it's made by someone who
with an idea. I got an idea.
Exactly. And they're wedging that. They're like, oh, it's a video game movie, so I can just get away with doing anything.
And we got to up the ante, because what do we replace interactivity with in a static film 2D experience? Well, we just make it stupid.
Exactly. I like sometimes when they take the game and they include the familiar hallmarks, but then they do their own thing with it. A good example of this that I'm a big defender of, I like this movie, I think it's one of the better video game adaptations, is Silent Hill, the first one.
Okay, never saw it.
It's directed by the same guy as the Brotherhood of the Wolf. Incredible visual.
That's a horror. That's a horror game.
Guns. Yeah, you have an ally right here, because I have long maintained that Silent Hill, the first one, not only is it one of the best video game movies ever made, it's one of the best horror movies ever made. That movie is a masterpiece. It's a visual, tonal, scoral, however you want to put it, masterpiece. It's so underrated.
It is. It really is. Great atmosphere. It's like the Blade Runner of horror, kind of, in terms of the visual look and the construction of the world, in a weird way. But and Christoph Gans, the creator of it, was a huge fan of the games. Like, he was obsessed with it. Apparently, he's coming back and making another one, by the way.
Yes, it's done filming, or it's shooting right now. He's making like a movie that completely ignores the Silent Hill sequel that already was. So he's making a new Silent Hill 2.
Yeah, that's a good call. That second one sucked. You knew anyone appreciate the fact that during that whole era when they were trying to shill the 3D televisions, what was that, like 2010 to 2014-ish?
Yeah, thereabouts. Avatar came in 2009, then they started rushing 3D post-conversions and TVs and everything from 2010 onwards. 2011, actually. Yeah, 2011. It took some time before the first generations of TVs came. So 2011 was like when the 3D TVs really started entering the market.
Yeah, but the beneficial byproduct is sort of as an outgrowth of this. You just look at a whole wave of movies and tell that they're utter detritus just by the fact that they have 3D at the end. Just that appellation right at the end. It immediately marks it. Oh, I don't have to bother with that. Fantastic.
No.
Well, that actually
3D converted.
Right.
Honestly, as we got going, the converted ones were better than the actual shot ones. You're not wrong. And that's just because they had more control. But no, it also corresponded with the McDonaldization of movies. That's the thing. So like everything was just like the last one. So it didn't matter if it was 3D or not. I ain't saving shit.
Well,
they were all junk. That was part of the problem.
Not that we're all jumping for joy over the Hobbit trilogy. That first movie that had the vomitorium, vomitorium actually means something that it doesn't sound like, it's not onomatopoeia. The stupid mine ride towards the beginning, where you're just like whipping through, and the impossible physics of all those little carts whipping along those tracks in the dungeons of the orc was the dumbest stuff, and it just completely ruined the movie. But that was 3D service,
right? No, absolutely. Terrible. Oh, and there was the worst part about those movies, and I actually do enjoy The Hobbit for what it is.
No. I enjoyed the movies, but they could cut them down to 2 movies.
Oh, absolutely, and that's clearly
actually
the
just
intended
1
format.
No, 2. Absolutely, there's enough for 2.
You could maybe, if you extended it out a little bit, but I remember the one that gets to me. I think it was in the third one, maybe the second one. That's another problem. They all blend together. It's the one where it's like a barrel ride. They're down a river, and it's just like watching. It really is like a Mr. Magoo cartoon or something. They're like
narrowly. It's like watching a video game without the controller.
Yes, absolutely. Oh, that one is rough. The padding in those movies.
It's terrible.
You could tell executives were just over his shoulder, like, okay, now we need an orc fight. Now we need another orc fight. Like,
well, that and just to spread it out over 3 movies, right? And he wasn't even doing his vision. He had to pick up what Guillermo was doing initially, because they had no time to change anything. I mean,
the purest distillation of the difference between the Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit trilogy is everyone buys the extended edition of the Lord of the Rings because you have to get that extra stuff. It feels more
I'm there. There he is.
Right, exactly. You get extra scenes that are great, that work. That shouldn't have been on the cutting room floor. But with the Hobbit, you like almost wish you could just have a 1 or 2 movie cut. you wish you could have the director's cut like 3/4 of the runtime off edition.
Yeah, you want the Phantom edit.
Exactly.
Or the book edition, basically, where they cut it down to nothing that isn't in the book.
Well, the problem with, not that we want to talk about The Hobbit. The Hobbit is not a very good adventure book. Lord of the Rings is. Not a lot happens in The Hobbit.
No,
so
and honestly,
there was a big challenge in that movie. But the only reason I brought this up is that movie fell into that period of time where executives were demanding 3D in the theater. Now 3D is dead for the most part in the theater.
Yeah,
thank God.
pretty much.
So that's the only reason I brought it up.
And
That's a perfect example of a movie series that was almost completely ruined by.
No, I was a fan of 3D though, and I think that you guys hit the nail on the head as far as what killed it, and that was just this incessant need to make everything 3D. Like that, because
also I think you think maybe VR. You think maybe VR coming on so strong for a little while there, anyways. May have had a part to play in that, because it's essentially got the same 3D technology in it, only you can actually be in it.
It has kind of taken over. Like 3D has died in television and in theaters, but I guess through the Oculus Rift and stuff like that, there's still people getting 3D films, and obviously some projectors and stuff still do it. So it's still around, but it's just, I think that's kind of where it's going to end up in the end of the day.
I think
the VR world. I think you're right.
Nothing will happen with VR until it makes people look less stupid using it.
No kidding. Exactly. The moment you don't have to have a toaster oven strapped to your ocular cortex. Like,
it's getting a little better, but no, you're right, Razörfist. Like, that's kind of the place I think it will end up going to, is because that's the only fun gimmick with it anymore, is to use it in VR. But I mean, it's still just like watching a screen. It's not like you're immersed in the movie, unless they find some way to do that. I mean,
you just tape 2 iPhones to your eyeballs. And you
well, it's already the same technology. That's what he's saying.
What's funny is when we had our video game Jewels of the Oracle, and we were at GamersCon in '95, I believe, they had a military 3D demo install that was really, really cool, because it was being used to train. They would set up some kind of village in the Middle East, and then you would go in and run through the streets. It was a real training system, but the frame rate was so low. I tried. You were on a treadmill, and you had that giant headgear, and I almost threw up in the headgear. The frame rate was so low, but it was quite neat. Now, any Call of Duty is 1,000 times more sophisticated than what we played with. But in 1995, and all those Silicon Graphic, mini mainframes chunking away, creating this world, that was pretty insane. But it was also cool that it was real military use. That's what made it neat.